Question 25. De La Cruz Enterprises, a UK-based welding company, is in the process of implementing replication to an off-site location for their Microsoft Hyper-V failover cluster. Corporate policy dictates all database servers must place native database dumps daily on controller 1 disk 011, and that these drives must always be excluded from backups. A backup administrator has created a replication job for a mission-critical Microsoft SQL server where disk 11 containing the database dump is excluded and application-aware processing has been enabled. The database administrator is reporting that Microsoft VSS is still processing disk 11 unexpectedly. How should the backup administrator proceed? Let's take a look at the answer options. This is because the virtual machine disk 11 is on a virtual SCSI controller. Move it to a SATA controller to mitigate the issue. I don't think this is going to be right. Why should there be some difference between SCSI and SATA? So that will probably be the same. This is because the virtual machine disk 11 is on a virtual IDE controller. Move it to a SCSI controller to mitigate the issue. I don't think it's going to be on 11 on a virtual IDE controller, but regardless, I also don't think we'll have these issues just because it was IDE. Not a good practice, but anyway. This is because the virtual disk 11 is on a virtual SATA controller. Move it to SCSI, so kind of the opposite one of that one up here. This is caused by a lack of permissions configured for application-aware processing on the Microsoft SQL Server database. And then it talks about some backup operator role here, but I also don't think this is going to be the issue here. So what is it that we really see? We have application-aware processing enabled, and we see that VSS is processing the disk, although it's being excluded. So the hard truth here, though, is that when we make the backup, okay, we can, of course, create a snapshot of the machine. We can go and exclude this disk here, so we just don't pull out any backups and stuff like that. But what happens before we start the backup? We have keying happening on, and I don't think there's any way we can really control the disks that are being processed with keying here. So we can maybe go and take a look. So Veeam user guide, backup, application aware processing. Okay, so let's take a look down here and see what can we find. So a little bit of a skimming here. So it definitely tells us that application-aware processing is the Veeam technology based on Microsoft VSS. And then we see some information here about how it works and things like that. So what do we then know? Let's see here. If it runs some application that's not supported, no, that's not the case here. So let's try and see if we can find something else about this. What do we have down here? Communication. No, nothing specific here. What about this runtime process? I think it will not really talk about that specifically. So we might have to dig a little bit deeper here in the jobs. So let's see if we can find something in the jobs here. This is where we were already. That's file exclusion. We want to go to disk exclusions, but anyway, let's go and take a peek here. So we have disks, VM disks. But this is what we would have done. We would have gone and excluded the disk from here. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't say anything specifically here about that. So of course we could always go to the lab and take a peek and just give it a try. That's generally my recommended way of testing everything, because while you can look up a lot of things in the guide here, of course, it just makes a lot of sense to go and take a closer look. But let's go and take a closer look right here. Okay, so let's try and go back and take a look here. So first of all, it's important to remember here, we're talking about Hyper-V, and it looks like we're in the vSphere guide. That's one issue. And secondly, it's a replication job, and we were looking at backups here. So let's click here and switch over to Hyper-V. Let's go down to replication, creating replication jobs. Let's expand this a little bit here. Take a look at exclude objects. Okay, we got it. And then let's go down here. See, so we're looking to exclude specific disks. Here we see. If you exclude disk from a backup and enable, so it's actually interesting, this is the replica section, and it talks about backups. I guess that's a little oversight, but anyway, if you exclude disk from a backup and enable application or processing, framework will still process disks and volumes on which the disks locate. So in this example here, we can see it would not really have anything to do with the controller that it would be on. It would be regardless happening. So as we can conclude, this would honestly be the expected behavior.